Despite the film's widespread acclaim, Lee Marvin privately dismissed The Dirty Dozen, insisting that its story crossed the line from gritty entertainment into outright fantasy. Frustrated by the way Hollywood often reshaped reality, Marvin dismissed the explosive violence and ragtag camaraderie as pure invention, a far cry from the real challenges soldiers faced in combat. He often bristled at interviews where fans praised the movie's daring missions and colorful cast, explaining that no true leader would ever trust a unit of criminals with a crucial military operation. Marvin stressed how his own battlefield experience made him uncomfortable, portraying his character as a loose cannon operating outside the rules, since he believed such behavior put actual lives at risk. Far from celebrating war movies that glorified reckless heroics, he much preferred roles like his later performance in The Big Red One, which confronted the toll and confusion of real warfare. Ironically, his blunt criticism gave fans a glimpse behind the Hollywood curtain, showing how personal conviction could sometimes clash with big-budget storytelling. However, when Lee Marvin spoke about the movie The Dirty Dozen, he made it clear that the film's depiction of war was very unrealistic. He pointed out that, in reality, war isn't filled with constant excitement or dramatic moments. Instead, real soldiers spend much of their time in long periods where nothing seems to happen, with occasional and intense bursts of fear and confusion. Marvin, having personal experience as a Marine, wanted viewers to understand that the movie showed a fantasy version of war. The film focused on non-stop action and suspense, which made it entertaining, but this approach ignored the slower and more stressful parts of actual combat service. Marvin's criticism highlights the difference between Hollywood storytelling and the everyday lives of people involved in war. He believed that the film's choice to keep the action moving at all times left out an important truth about warfare. This constant motion doesn't match up with what veterans remember about their real experiences. While The Dirty Dozen might offer thrilling scenes, it does not give audiences an accurate view of what life in the Army is actually like, according to Marvin. However, when discussing The Dirty Dozen, a major point raised by Marvin was the questionable realism in the casting of its main characters. He observed that the actors portraying the special operations soldiers appeared much older than the age range typical for such demanding military roles. These men, chosen for a dangerous mission behind enemy lines, were supposed to be at the peak of their physical and mental capabilities, ready for intense combat and espionage tasks. In reality, the actors seemed closer to the age of retirement than that of battle-ready soldiers. Marvin's critique highlights that the physical characteristics and energy levels of the cast simply did not match what audiences might expect from elite fighters tasked with near-impossible objectives. This mismatch caused a sense of disbelief for some viewers who found it hard to imagine these older men executing strenuous action scenes, sneaking through enemy territory, or carrying out the kind of high-stakes missions portrayed in the film. Such casting decisions, according to Marvin, detracted from the movie's overall authenticity, and made it harder for some viewers to fully engage with the story as a believable depiction of wartime heroics. Meanwhile, when discussing war films from the same era, one clear comparison emerges between The Dirty Dozen and The Big Red One. The authenticity of The Big Red One draws much of its strength from Samuel Fuller's own experience as a World War II veteran, allowing the film to convey a sense of realism rarely matched by its contemporaries. In contrast, The Dirty Dozen often trades in spectacle and exaggerated action, emphasizing a sensational approach that prioritizes entertainment and suspense over realism. The film's narrative follows a group of military prisoners on a dangerous mission, which often relies on dramatic and sometimes implausible scenes, starkly different from the grounded depiction found in The Big Red One. Such differences become apparent in the depiction of military life and combat, where Fuller's film emphasizes the chaos, hardship, and unpredictable nature of war, reflecting his first-hand knowledge. Meanwhile, The Dirty Dozen opts for dramatic confrontations, stylized violence, and character archetypes that build tension and excitement, but sometimes drift away from the realities of actual warfare. This points to a broader divide between war-themed movies that aim for verisimilitude and others that cater to escapism. Interest in accuracy can affect an audience's emotional engagement. Films like The Big Red One evoke empathy through their believability, while The Dirty Dozen draws the audience in with high stakes, elaborate set pieces, and charismatic anti-heroes. This contrast highlights why some viewers and critics praise the more realistic approach, seeing it as a tribute to the lived experiences of soldiers, whereas more sensational films are seen as stylized interpretations designed to thrill rather than inform. Despite the huge success of The Dirty Dozen at the box office, Marvin never hid his dissatisfaction with the film's focus. He criticized its purpose, believing it was made to cash in on the audience's love for big, thrilling war stories, while ignoring the deep pain and truth that war brings to real people. Marvin, who had seen combat himself, wanted films to actually show what battle does to those involved, and he saw the movie's flashy action as missing that reality. On set, his personal struggles were obvious. Marvin's long history with alcohol, which had started partly because of the trauma he carried from his wartime service, often got in the way of production. The cast and crew sometimes faced frustrating delays when Marvin's drinking habits became severe, and he couldn't work. These incidents would throw off schedules and create tension behind the scenes, leading some involved in the movie to feel both concerned and helpless about Marvin's visible pain. His battle with alcohol cast a long shadow over the making of the film, reminding everyone nearby that the cost of war lingers, showing up in unexpected and sometimes destructive ways. The mood on set would sometimes shift from excitement to worry when Marvin struggled, making it clear that while the movie aimed to entertain, real-life wounds were never far from sight. After experiencing intense combat, while serving in the Pacific during World War II, Marvin developed a unique perspective on how war should be shown in movies. His military background gave him first-hand knowledge of the brutal realities and psychological impacts that many soldiers faced in battle. This experience shaped his opinions on the way war stories were told on screen, and he often openly expressed a certain disdain for films that he felt glamorized violence or missed the complexity of real conflict. While Marvin's critical view influenced his approach to acting in war-themed movies, his involvement in The Dirty Dozen brought an unexpected kind of attention. The film, despite his reservations, became an enormous box office hit. Audiences flocked to theaters, making it one of the highest-grossing movies of its era. In addition, critics responded positively, praising its action, cast, and gripping storyline. The movie's mix of suspense, grit, and strong performances captured the public's imagination, even though Marvin himself remained skeptical of how authentic its portrayal of war truly was. This contrast between Marvin's private skepticism and the film's public triumph highlighted the complex relationship between lived experience and popular culture's appetite for dramatic stories about war. Although more than 50 years have passed since its debut, The Dirty Dozen is still seen as a turning point for movies about war. The ripple effect from this film can be spotted wherever a group of mismatched soldiers is sent on an impossible mission. Hundreds of filmmakers have tried to copy the efficient way The Dirty Dozen put together its story, its group of odd characters, and its harsh violence, giving birth to a clear formula for future war and action films. Its influence can be seen in later movies featuring large casts with varied personalities, each with their own quirks and flaws but forced to work together. This legacy stays strong, even when critics or actors like Lee Marvin have shared complaints about their own involvement or the movie's approach. Audiences still talk about the movie and compare new releases to it. Directors and writers point back to The Dirty Dozen as an early example of what could be done with an ensemble cast. Instead of fading away, the film's reputation has grown, and people still enjoy watching it. Younger filmmakers and writers keep referencing it as a key inspiration, showing how one movie can shape a whole category. The Dirty Dozen's combination of tough attitude, complicated teamwork, and high-stakes missions changed what audiences expect from war films, and helped set the stage for everything that followed in that genre. Robert Aldrich's 1967 film The Dirty Dozen occupies a distinctive place in the landscape of war movies, both reveling in its straightforward genre trappings and quietly undermining the conventions it seems to embrace. On its surface, the film delivers a classic blend of tension, robust action, and raucous humor. It tells the outrageous story of a group of military prisoners, murderers, rapists, thieves, who are offered the chance at redemption by undertaking a near-suicidal mission behind enemy lines during World War II. Audiences are pulled into rooting for these unlikely heroes, and are encouraged to laugh at their reckless, irreverent behavior, which provides much of the film's sense of fun. Yet, beneath this boisterous action, the film pulses with a much darker, more cynical perspective on war. Rather than simply celebrating heroics, The Dirty Dozen consistently prods its audience to question the morality of its own setup. The mission these men are tasked with, essentially a massacre of unsuspecting German officers and their companions unsettlingly echoes the atrocities of the same war it claims to dramatize. This subtle parallel complicates the narrative, introducing a level of discomfort that sits in stark contrast with the film's entertainment value. The story morphs into a meditation on the insanity inherent to all wars, implicitly suggesting that even conflicts broadly considered just and necessary, such as World War II, are not free from deep moral ambiguity. Aldrich's approach is notably understated, especially when compared to other anti-war films of the era like MASH, which confronts the ethics of war with open satire and overt protest. While MASH is bold and clear in its commentary, The Dirty Dozen subverts expectations quietly, making its ultimate message almost easy to overlook if one focuses solely on the action and humor. This quiet subversion makes the film more complex than it might first appear, inviting multiple interpretations and emotional responses from viewers. The enjoyment factor of The Dirty Dozen is undeniable. Aldrich crafts sequences that are both suspenseful and exhilarating, giving audiences every reason to become invested in the fate of these flawed characters. Yet, there's also a sense that the film's humor, on closer inspection, might slip into juvenile territory, and that its ironies, which seem clever on first viewing, can feel somewhat facile or heavy-handed when reconsidered. The initial impact of the film's daring premise may soften with time, and for some viewers, its once subversive energy may diminish rather than deepen upon repeated viewings. Despite these reservations, The Dirty Dozen remains a fascinating and iconoclastic entry in the war film canon. Its legacy lies not just in its explosive set pieces or its roster of memorable anti-heroes, but in its ability to make viewers reflect, even uncomfortably, on the thin line between justified warfare and sanctioned brutality. For those willing to look beyond the action, the film offers a nuanced, layered portrait of war that resists simple categorization. Aldrich's willingness to interrogate even the most accepted narratives of heroism represents a boldness that still sets the film apart, ensuring its relevance for viewers seeking both entertainment and substance. As the dust settles on the battlefield and the echoes of explosions fade away, the story behind the scenes is just beginning. The men you've just watched fight side by side face their own real-life challenges and triumphs beyond the screen. In this next segment, we pull back the curtain on the now iconic cast, revealing unexpected twists in their lives and careers. Some found greater fame after this film, while others disappeared from Hollywood's bright lights. You'll discover who struggled with typecasting, who found new roles they never expected, and who made surprising turns outside of acting altogether. Stories of resilience, rivalry, and reinvention are woven through their personal journeys. This bonus part uncovers how the experiences on set shaped the lives of these men, both in their own words and through rare archival footage. Join us as we trace the winding paths of the Dirty Dozen cast and discover the fascinating afterlife of this legendary ensemble. Known for his imposing presence and weathered face, George Kennedy played Major Max Armbruster in 1967's The Dirty Dozen, bringing an unusual mix of hard-edged discipline and deep, almost mournful humanity to the role. Kennedy's Armbruster was no mere background officer. He was the voice of authority who gave the mission its dark gravity, reminding viewers of the cost of war. After leaving the set, Kennedy's life didn't follow a straight line upward. While he won an Oscar for Cool Hand Luke, his successes were often shadowed by personal turmoil. Kennedy's marriages were turbulent, with bitter divorces and public fights in courtrooms. Loss seemed to follow him. His wife Joan died suddenly, sending him into depression, and eventually leading him to adopt several children, one of whom struggled with addiction and legal troubles, echoing much of the hardship Kennedy himself faced. His own upbringing. Even with these private battles, Kennedy kept reinventing himself through the 70s and 80s, moving from tough guy roles to the dry comedy of The Naked Gun, all while facing near financial ruin due to mismanaged investments. In his later years, Kennedy withdrew from Hollywood life, rarely appearing in public. The last credible reports from his family indicate that Kennedy spent his final days quietly in Idaho, still haunted by the tragedies that marked his path. Hildegard Neff's role in the 1967 film The Dirty Dozen cast an unusual shadow over her reputation. She played Countess Marie, an enigmatic figure adding layers of tension and intrigue to the film's world. Her performance was marked by restraint and sharp intelligence, a highlight even in a cast crowded with well-known faces. After the movie, Neff's life drifted between triumph and heartbreak. Her earlier rise as a post-war German film star was darkened by constant scandal, first sparked by her daring nude scene in The Murderers Are Among Us, a choice that haunted her for years. In America, promises of stardom twisted into bitterness, with studios branding her as difficult Lieutenant Neff's turbulent personal life, became public gossip, failed marriages, addiction, and harsh criticism in the press. Her frank autobiography, The Gift Horse, revealed more, the trauma of surviving wartime Berlin and cancer, along with bitter feuds with directors and lovers. Still, she rebuilt herself as a celebrated singer and cabaret star, her smoky voice and melancholic lyrics making her beloved and misunderstood in equal measure. In later years, Neff struggled with illness but continued to perform until her health broke. Her death in 2002 closed a life torn between genius and controversy, leaving behind a legacy of talent and turmoil that time only makes sharper. Telly Savalas brought a threatening presence to Archer J. Maggot, one of the darkest characters in The Dirty Dozen. With cold cruelty, Savalas made Maggot both hateful and memorable, playing him as a religious fanatic with violent, disturbing tendencies. The role showcased Savalas' ability to portray troubled men, helping secure his place as a Hollywood heavyweight. After filming ended, Savalas' rise continued with projects like Kojak, where his bald head and raspy voice became trademarks. Away from the spotlight, his life was marked by a string of stormy romances and publicized gambling, especially in Las Vegas, where he both won and lost fortunes. His relationship stirred scandal, including a bitter split with actress Sally Adams that made tabloid headlines. Savalas also faced health scares, including a battle with bladder cancer later in life, pushing him into reclusion as his fame faded. He returned briefly for ads and late-era film roles, showing flashes of the intensity that made him a legend. Reports confirmed he died in 1994, closing a career full of high drama both on-screen and off. John Cassavetes brought a dangerous energy as Victor R. Franco, a convict with few scruples and a mean edge. In The Dirty Dozen, he made Franco unpredictable, a man smirking one moment and snarling the next, always watching for an angle. Cassavetes was already fighting his own battles off-screen. His fierce independence set him apart in Hollywood, and after the film, he rarely played by anyone's rules but his own. Cassavetes shifted from acting for big studios to directing his own scripts, bankrolling movies like Faces and A Woman Under the Influence with borrowed money and personal risk. The press called him difficult, sometimes combative, with stories of unpaid debts and bitter fights with top executives. He had well-known blowouts with even his closest friends. His marriage to Jenna Rollins, though strong and creative, was tested by his wild methods and endless hustling for funds. Rumors swirled about Cassavetes' drinking and his obsessive work habits driving wedges between him and his cast. Yet he always returned to film, creating some of the most raw, unsettling characters seen at that time. Cassavetes died in 1989 from cirrhosis after years of heavy drinking. Decades later, his movies still haunt viewers, and his legacy as a rebel and risk-taker in American cinema remains unmatched. Ernest Borgnine played General Worden with a stone-cold firmness, pulling every ounce of tension from the script. His glare alone could wilt men twice his size. After The Dirty Dozen, the real drama unfolded far from the spotlight. Borgnine, always rugged on screen, faced a stormy personal life off it. His third marriage to singer Ethel Merman famously failed within weeks, marked by wild fights and bitter silences. Whispers about this turbulent union haunted both stars, especially when Merman later published a memoir with an empty chapter bearing only the title, My Marriage to Ernest Borgnine. Financial trouble lurked through the 70s, and Borgnine bitterly fought to avoid being typecast, seeking out any part that would let him escape the shadow of military hardmen and violent loners. Still, he clung to a stubborn defiance. Stories lingered about his volcanic temper behind closed doors, and his struggle with loneliness as friends drifted away. In his later years, Borgnine reinvented himself through charismatic voice work and quirky comedy, finding a new audience. In his last public sightings, he seemed aged but content, sometimes appearing at military tributes, a faded cap pulled low, the glint of old defiance in his cloudy eyes. Clint Walker's role as Samson Posey in The Dirty Dozen stood out for his quiet brutality and silent strength. Posey was almost mute, towering over the others, with a menacing presence that Clint Walker captured using just his size and lingering stares. After this film, Walker could have faded quietly, but his life veered into unexpected territory. Not long after, he was almost killed in a freak skiing accident in Mammoth Mountain when a ski pole punctured his heart, an injury so severe that he was first pronounced dead at the hospital before miraculously recovering. Walker went on to take roles in TV movies and made guest appearances on popular series, yet his health struggles, including recurring heart problems, shaped his later years. Rumors swirled of his rumored drinking, and his multiple marriages were often followed by public divorces that made headlines. He slipped from stardom into relative privacy, shying away from conventions and interviews, living out his last days in the grasslands of Nevada. Reports indicate he died peacefully in 2018. He left behind a legend with an edge of untold stories and lingering shadows. Robert Ryan played Colonel Everett Dasher Breed with ice-cold precision and an underlying anger that gave the character a forbidding power. Ryan's performance stood out for its simmering resentment and authoritarian edge, often clashing with Lee Marvin's character on screen. After The Dirty Dozen, Ryan's life took a turbulent turn. He remained in demand in Hollywood, known for roles in The Wild Bunch and The Iceman Cometh, but behind the scenes his private life grew increasingly troubled. Ryan, famous for playing tough, flawed men, battled his own demons, including a tense marriage to Jessica Cadwallader rocked by frequent arguments and rumors of infidelity. Known for his progressive politics, he was harshly targeted by watchdog groups during the Red Scare, marked as a communist sympathizer, which damaged both his finances and reputation. Health issues began to darken his career in the early 1970s, as he fought a painful struggle with lung cancer, likely fueled by years of chain smoking. Ryan gave his final performance despite being gravely ill, refusing help, caught between professional pride and physical decline. He died in 1973, leaving behind 3 children and a legacy of intense, shadowy roles. There have been no new revelations about Robert Ryan in recent years. His story stands, veiled in a mix of strength, sorrow, and the secrets he carried to the end. Charles Bronson played Joseph T. Ladislaw in The Dirty Dozen, a man known for his cold composure and rough past. Bronson's own life shadowed this darkness. Born Charles Buchinski in poverty, he worked in coal mines as a teen, buried siblings, and watched his father die young. The war broke him in, and acting became his escape. After The Dirty Dozen, Bronson turned into a global icon, but serenity never followed. His icy stare fit the roles of loners and outcasts, yet it was more than acting. He lived behind walls. At home, Bronson battled jealousy and anger. Stories swirled of violent outbursts, and his marriage to Jill Ireland was battered by rumors and hardship. Ireland's death from cancer nearly destroyed him, and Bronson withdrew deeper, shielded by suspicion. Lawsuits and family feuds tainted his last years. His own mind failed him as Alzheimer's set in, and he died in 2003, nearly silent, still a ghost behind hard eyes. There are no public updates beyond Bronson's estate conflicts. Trini Lopez played Pedro Jimenez in The Dirty Dozen, standing out as the quiet, but determined soldier whose fate ended with a sudden, shocking death scene. A moment the audience remembers for its abruptness and brutality. Lopez's role was brief, but haunted the film's legacy, as rumors later swirled that studio politics and tensions with the crew led to his character's early demise. This role was supposed to usher him into Hollywood, but it marked the start of doors quietly closing. Burdened by the industry's reluctance to let a Latino star truly break through, Lopez turned back to music, where he had already rocked the charts with If I Had a Hammer, but fame brought shadows. In the late 1960s, scandals flickered about conflicts with recording labels, with his team allegedly sabotaging his follow-up hits. Behind closed doors, Lopez struggled with deep loneliness after a rumored affair with a fellow celebrity shattered his reputation in showbiz circles. Financial troubles later plagued him, with creditors circling and intimate details leaking out in tabloids, casting a darkness over his sparkling stage persona. In his later years, Lopez returned home to Texas, largely withdrawing from public life, occasionally appearing at tribute concerts and local events, his voice carrying the weariness of roads less traveled and friends lost. The last known public sighting reported a frail figure, guitar in hand, still haunted by what might have been. Jim Brown's role as Robert T. Jefferson in The Dirty Dozen stunned audiences with its power and presence. Brown delivered a simmering intensity, portraying a man who carried silent burdens. This film, released in 1967, was a turning point. Shortly after, Brown retired from football at his peak, shocking the sports world. His post-NFL career shined in Hollywood, with hits like 100 Rifles and Slaughter, but scandal shadowed his fame. Accusations of domestic violence and multiple arrests haunted him for decades. Despite these, Brown fought for civil rights, meeting with the likes of Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, and founded the American Foundation to aid at-risk youth. Yet, darkness followed him. Brown faced jail time in 22 for refusing domestic violence counseling. He spent later years defending his legacy, his status as a revolutionary athlete often clashing with his public controversies. The last known updates show Brown living quietly, his public appearances rare, the fire that made him an icon now dimmed by time, yet never fully extinguished. Donald Sutherland's portrayal of Vernon L. Pinkley in the 1967 film The Dirty Dozen was electric and unpredictable, his sly smirk revealing both danger and sly humor. Pinkley, the oddball among killers, became a strangely likable wild card, thanks to Sutherland's nervous energy and deadpan wit. This breakout role catapulted Sutherland from small TV parts into the global spotlight, but fame did not bring calm. Soon after, his marriage to Lois Hardwick ended amid rumors of affairs and on-set romances. Through the 70s, Sutherland's career soared with dark, complex films like Don't Look Now and Clute, but success came with whispers about his difficult nature on set. He was famously blacklisted by some directors for his outspoken views against authority, and he became entangled in political storms during the Vietnam War, marching with Jane Fonda and gaining enemies in powerful circles. While his children, especially Kiefer, became stars in their own right, Sutherland quietly battled depression and strained relationships with family. He lost friends to overdose, drifted through London's grey winters, and clashed with aging, both physically and in his refusal to retire. In recent years, Sutherland became reclusive, avoiding social media and public events, appearing only rarely for select projects or award ceremonies. The last known information shows him living quietly in Quebec, rarely granting interviews, his life wrapped in shadows and old secrets. Lee Marvin delivered an unforgettable performance as Major John Reisman, a brutal, scarred Army officer balancing cold precision and raw disdain for authority. Marvin's stoic, harsh face and troubled gaze turned Reisman into a man haunted by war and loss, whose leadership was born from necessity, not glory. This role became Marvin's signature, shadowing him long after the film wrapped. Marvin's own life mirrored some of this darkness. After the movie's release, he fought personal demons, including battles with alcohol that led to violent bar brawls and high-profile legal troubles, most notably the 1979 palimony lawsuit brought by his ex-girlfriend Michelle Triola. The case dragged his private life through public scrutiny, exposing the chaos beneath his steely exterior. Marvin's career often showed him as a hard, wounded man, but off-screen, he struggled with depression and injuries from his service in World War II. His health declined through the early 1980s, with hospitalizations for respiratory issues. Marvin died in Tucson, Arizona, in 1987, leaving behind a legacy of tough characters shaped by a life as raw and complicated as any he played. Ralph Meeker brought a heavy presence as Captain Stuart Kender, the Army psychiatrist tasked with breaking through hardened exteriors in The Dirty Dozen. His calm, unsettling authority left a lasting impression, hinting at hidden depth and personal struggle. After the film, Meeker's career flickered with both promise and misfortune. Once praised for his raw intensity in earlier hits like Kiss Me Deadly, he drifted into TV work and lesser-known movies, a slow decline partly blamed on typecasting and his refusal to court Hollywood elites. In private, shadows loomed. Meeker's relationships were turbulent, marked by brief marriages and rumors of heavy drinking. There were whispers of confrontations on set, and a reputation for unpredictability that kept producers wary. Health problems began haunting him in the late 70s, slowing his work to a trickle. By the early 80s, suffering strokes and diminished by time, Meeker faded from public life. He died quietly in 1988, mostly alone, leaving behind a trail of characters carved deep with darkness and detachment. Dick Miller's role as the MP at the hanging in The Dirty Dozen was small but unsettling, marked by a stern presence as he oversaw the doomed prisoners. Though only briefly on screen, Miller's part added a touch of realism to the grim atmosphere of military justice. After his fleeting brush with such a high-profile film, Miller's career slipped back into the shadows. He kept working, mostly in gritty B-movies and television. Beneath the surface, his life was riddled with struggle. One of Hollywood's most recognizable character actors, typecast and often undervalued, Miller grew bitter. His working-class roots never left him, and the doors of stardom never fully opened. Insiders recall his sharp temper at auditions, his suspicions about missing out on big roles, and his infamous clash with a studio executive in 1975 over a pay dispute, an altercation that haunted him for years and kept him from landing larger roles. Personal hardships stacked up as well, including a costly divorce and a brief battle with alcoholism that led him to disappear from the scene for nearly 2 years. Miller eventually reemerged, living quietly with his second wife, often seen at cult film conventions, where he remained a cult favorite, but never found the peace or acclaim he sought. In his later years, public appearances declined, and as of the last reports, he was living in seclusion, his legacy defined by hard-edged roles and untold disappointments. Richard Jekyll brought a hard-wired tension to Sergeant Boren, the sharp-eyed right hand in the Dirty Dozen's chaos. Beneath the tough exterior, Jekyll mirrored the quiet, dogged men he played, enduring, alert, always in the middle of the fray. After the film made him famous, he stayed loyal to supporting roles, often playing soldiers, cowboys, men defined by scars. Off-camera, his life ran on rougher roads. Jekyll was known for his wild temper, which cost him more than one job. In Hollywood circles, rumors swirled about bar fights and blacklists. His battle wasn't just career drift. The specter of cancer stalked him, hitting hardest in the late 1990s when he was diagnosed with melanoma. He kept working until the very end, sometimes while visibly ill. Friends described him as both haunted and loyal, never fully comfortable in the light, drawn to shadows in both real life and fiction. In his last years, medical bills forced his family to sue the actors' union for support. A bitter end for a man who spent decades beside stars, but never quite in their glow. Jekyll died in 1997, his legacy a mix of toughness, tragedy, and unyielding authenticity. The Dirty Dozen wasn't just another war film, it connected a group of actors whose fates often mirrored the struggles of their on-screen characters. Lee Marvin, who played Major Reisman, battled alcoholism after the film, but later earned an Oscar for Cat Ballou. Charles Bronson, who'd grown up in poverty, became an unlikely international action star. Jim Brown left a groundbreaking football career behind after the film faced delays, marking a bold shift to Hollywood. John Cassavetes, known for his real-life rebellious streak, pushed indie filmmaking forward after an Oscar nomination for his role. Trini Lopez left acting behind entirely, shaken by rumors about his character's death. All these paths trace back to a moment in 1967 when brave odds and unlikely friendships made something lasting. Did you watch The Dirty Dozen during your childhood, or later with family or friends? What moments stick with you, and how did the cast shape your memories? Share your stories in the comments